Good morning and welcome back to working with developing a motif. My motif for this series is the Trinity Church, and I'm going to be developing it today with an eye towards tonal values or lights and darks. And I hope to generate some distinctive qualities of different moods by varying the lights and darks. What you see in front of you is a tonal value scale. It's you've probably recognized it. You see it in a lot of art books. It's 10 iterations on a gray scale going from white to black. Below that you see 3 brackets, a mid-range, a light range, and a dark range. And this is how I tend to approach my work with tonal values: light, medium, dark. I try to think in terms of 3 because it makes it so much easier. And what I'm developing here is a motif of the Fairbanks house in snow. Here I'm trying to communicate an early morning mood where it's very soft and hazy. In this case, the 3 values are very close in range: the light, the medium, and the dark. And the medium is the larger value is rather strong. Here I'm trying to develop a mood of a little later in the day when shadows are getting stronger, light is getting brighter off of the snow, and the values are further apart. There's a higher contrast between each value. This helps to communicate a bright, more lively painting. And this last one is full sunlight, overhead sunlight, giving us our maximum distance between our 3 values: light, medium, and dark. The medium value here is quite light actually, and there's a smaller amount of darks and a small amount of bright lights. So I'm going to be developing this idea over 3 small paintings. These are studies that I like to do. And the size of this painting is maybe 6 by 9 or 8 by 10. It's quite small. Usually it's on a paper that I'm ready to discard because there's a failed painting on the other side. And I do these studies to generate ideas. So I'm very casual about them. I'm working with a single color, which is a sepia, a warm hue, or in this case it might be neutral tint. Some of the others I think I'm using a warmer hue. In any case, I'm developing a scene that I don't have a reference for. I'm don't have a photograph for this. I'm using a scene that I've been painting for a while now as I've been developing my motif. So it's quite familiar to me, and you might say in some case I've memorized it. But I'm trying to evoke what I feel to be a snowy day, a day where snow has fallen or it's still falling, and the air is very wet. There's not much light because of the cloud cover, so I'm making an effort to keep my lights and darks relatively close together. And in this case, I'm really focusing on the small edges of things, or on a lighter mass, to give that sensation that snow is just fallen. And as I continue to build the image, I'm trying to show that, the sky, look how dark the sky is relative to the building, and the building itself relatively light. So in this study, I'm trying to keep my values relatively close together and thinking about the midtone, which is we have lights, we have darks, and we have a midtone. If you squint your eyes, you can see the midtone evolving, and it's actually rather dark in this painting, relatively dark. There are small amounts of darker values. There are smaller amounts of lighter values. I try to think in terms of 3, with the largest amount going towards the midtone. In other words, I'm trying to give more midtone to the painting than just about than the lights or the darks. This is a common practice with visual artists because we really work hard to find ways to simplify our image. One of the things that we do when we're standing in front of nature or contemplating our painting is we squint our eyes, or we intentionally blur our vision so that not only do we avoid detail this way, but we also see similar values as being one shape. In other words, I see the church itself, the background building, the building to the right, some of the foreground, even some of the sky as being one value. And that one value is structured around some of the highlights in this case to make them pop out. And this is a very useful practice. So if you find that when you're working from your subject, that you're dwelling too much on detail or that you're becoming preoccupied with minor parts of the painting, I suggest you squint your eyes and try to blur your vision enough so that you can see the commonalities, the things which are similar as being one. This helps you to see your painting from a larger perspective. It helps you to see the larger picture, in fact. So that's what I mean by I'm joining mid-values. I'm actually seeing multiple buildings as being one shape, and I'm painting them that way. Later on, we can always distinguish them. We can pull one out or push one back, distinguish a building if we want, or we can leave it in that state. Sometimes a picture has a greater strength when you leave it in that simple state. Well, I'm continuing to build the midtone, darkening it so that the lights are coming out a little more, especially lower in the painting. This is where if I have to declare a focal point, it's through the lower part of the painting where people are walking towards the front entrance of the church, and you see more darks down there, more hard edges, and certainly there's more softness, more commonality between the edges in the upper third of the painting. So this is what's pulling our eye to the focal center. These small studies that you'll see me doing over the next 15 minutes or so are also, they have a benefit to the artist because they ask you to evoke your memory. And in this case, I'm remembering what the snow looked like upon the Trinity Church. I'm also using my imagination. I'm engaging my imagination and realizing that I need to leave the rooftops a little lighter, or the edges of the rooftops a little lighter, or the branches of the trees a little lighter, certainly the foreground where the snow has fallen. These are things that I'm adding based on my memory and my imagination. And sometimes, very often in fact, as the painting is evolving, the painting itself suggests where to leave an area, where to add a dark, where to add a midtone. I know that sounds mysterious and unusual, but it's part of this process when you step away from your image source and paint based on imagination and memory. A lot of this happens, and you start to see more potential in your painting than you did when you were constantly shifting your attention from your painting to the image source and back again. This sort of back and forth is quite a distraction. And as you get to know your image, as I'm getting to know my image in this series where I'm developing a motif, as you get to know your image, you have more freedom to work this way, where your painting can actually suggest a course of action. Here you see me returning to the sky, dulling some edges, pulling some additional gray down into the sky to soften that area. All this is done with the intention of sort of focusing on the lower section of the painting. You caught my hairdryer in action. I hope this is clear that how we're controlling lights and darks to effectively create a mood. It's not the only tool in our toolbox, but it is one of the stronger ones when we can gain a sort of confidence with tonal values and a sort of working knowledge of tonal values. Our painting really takes a jump, and we end up having a greater freedom and more expressive power. So this is the small study in a finished stage. You can easily see how this could be developed into a larger piece. In this case, I'm going to proceed and start to develop a piece based on a different lighting condition, a lighting condition where the light is coming from the side. We might call it a 3/4 light or ambient light, and a different mood, a different tonal dynamic. In all these paintings, I'm working from the same drawing. I drew it 3 times, the same view of Trinity Church, and the variations come as I apply color and think about the relationship of tonal values. Here I have an idea to really create a dark, rich midtone with a little bit of ambient light coming through the lower section and a little bit of the bright light in the sky to pull our attention up as well. And in fact, you see I haven't done anything to the sky. The intention is to build up the midtones, the dark midtones first, and later add some light hues to the sky, some light washes to the sky, and as well add some strong darks into trees and doorways in the lower section. This mood that I would like to evoke is one which we might experience in the early morning, where shadows are still prevalent, but we're starting to see brighter surfaces as the sun is coming over the buildings. We're feeling a brightness to the sky. We're also feeling what we call light bounce, or light bouncing back up into a surface. This is really very commonplace, whether you're painting still life, whether you're painting figures, portraits, whether you're painting urbanscapes as we are, that light is always traveling, always moving through your subject. It's not only in the sky. In fact, the light is so strong that it's bouncing up off of the ground and into objects. And this we communicate, or in this particular painting, I'm communicating that through the first graded wash that you see, where I've gone a little darker on the rooftop and much lighter as the building is coming towards the ground. This is, I feel, going to be helpful in indicating the light bouncing up off of the surface and back into the building. Also, in the ground area, I started with this graded wash, so you're feeling already a bit of luminosity on the ground, and that ground is going to have a connection with the front of the building. These light areas that I'm leaving to the side are indicative of maybe highlighted surfaces. I've left them based on my intuition and my imagination. Whether they stay this way through the finish of the painting, I'm not sure yet. We'll see. It all depends on how I feel the painting should develop and as it's developing. So this is another benefit to working with these small studies is I feel there's a great sort of liberty that you feel, and a great sort of freedom when you're working from your imagination, you're working from memory, to explore things, to feel uninhibited, to kind of explore what might be. And in the process, you actually discover what is. And by that I mean this luminosity becomes more apparent. After painting it, I see it in my subject. When I'm traveling in nature, I see it much more. So there's a back and forth between our painting and our experience of life. This is something that I've come to realize. And it seems, so far, it seems perpetual. In fact, what I mean by that is unending. I feel like this will go on as long as I'm able to paint, that I'll be able to bring out something in my painting that I then find in nature, and vice versa. So this is growth. I take it as growth. Well, you can see the painting is finishing up in the lower sections. This right section is a bit distracting to me. I feel I'm probably going to at some point return and dull that bright section on the right, certainly add some color to the sky to quiet that area. Here, the midtone, if we're thinking in terms of 3, and this is how I approach the painting, the midtone was stated early with the big block of the building and the rising distant buildings and the foreground. I'm seeing this all as one mid-value, believe it or not. If I squint my eyes, I am seeing some little darks that I've added since then, but that initial start was to state the very large shape of Trinity Church and the adjoining buildings and foreground as one tone. And into that tone, I'm going to be adding some darks, and the areas that are left lighter are the areas of the upper building on the right side or the sky. And whether they stay that way through the end of the painting, I'm not sure yet. Well, you can see I'm placing some figures. These figures help to create depth, and they do give a strong feeling of scale to the building. Until the figures appear, we can kind of guess at the depth, at the scale, but it's not quite as strong a read as if we include a few figures. So I include the figures mainly for that reason. Also, they are present, and I paint them as I feel they should be, walking through the scene, catching some of the highlights, moving towards the church, etc. And you see me now, I'm adjusting some of those light values. They were a little bothering, and now I believe I'm going to paint the sky with a bit of a light tone. Perhaps not. Anyway, you can see a different mood in this painting. This painting is more evocative of a transitory time where light is just starting to filter into the scene. This last rendition, the third rendition that I'm doing, is based on seeing the same motif in what we might call the golden hour, what is commonly known as the golden hour, which is that hour that precedes the sunset. In other words, the sun is very low in the sky, coming right over our shoulder and striking, in this case it's striking a Trinity Church, and kind of just bouncing off Trinity Church, creating a very luminous feeling to the building. It's striking, and even in the shadows that fall below, you'll see there's a certain luminosity. Here, I did state the midtone. Even though it was a very light wash, I state the midtone very early with very pale color. And I'm painting the sky now. You can see I'm creating that shape of joined buildings through painting the sky. But overall, these buildings are going to remain quite bright, quite luminous, as this is in harmony with the sort of mood that I want to convey, which is low light, low raking light coming across the scene and striking the trees, Trinity Church, and a deep shadow in the foreground to suggest buildings behind casting shadows. So this is the last light of the day falling directly on Trinity Church. And you can see that. I've seen that in my walking around Boston, where catching this time of day upon my subject, and it shows a completely different mood. It's a really sort of glorious view when you see that golden light falling onto buildings or onto a forest or onto anything. It's kind of a treasured moment for visual artists, for photographers, and for those who just enjoy walking in nature to see that time of day, the golden hour. So you can see it's a very different approach this time, really working from that first light tone, and now I'm adding some darker shadows, but still very conscious of that first application and trying to refine it by adding some pretty powerful darks to the light tone. So I'm really using a high contrast in this study, as we saw in our opening scenes. This would be the version that is expressing a high contrast. There's a big difference between the lightest light and the darkest dark, and that combination is used in my main subject, my main motif. So the shadows that I have added below kind of quiet the foreground, and I believe give us a nice entry into the painting. The darks that I'm adding now are difficult because they need to be precise and they need to be descriptive. They also need to be, still feeling painterly. That's how I'll put it. I want them to still feel like painted marks, like they're coming off of a brush. I don't smooth them out too much. You can feel as I add the darks how the luminosity is being captured. If I start to add some real strong, thick paint, then you'll start to feel the forms pop, and you'll start to feel that the angle of the light upon the church itself. One thing I should say, it's perhaps a little off topic, but it has an importance to the watercolorist, which is paint consistency. When we work in these tonal studies, I find that I'm thinking much more about, and I'm much more conscious of measuring paint consistency than when I'm working with color. And this shouldn't be the case, but it seems to be the case. In any case, this is a benefit for the watercolorist because the paint consistency translates directly into the lightness or darkness of any color that we're using. And this seems to be a very elusive part of watercolor, is how to approximate the strength of color, the strength of tone that you want in your finished painting. Time and time again, I see with the students' work, they'll apply a wash and it looks great going on, but after it dries, the color has paled by about 20%. Here, if there is an error, is misjudging the paint consistency, not necessarily the color. So working with these tonal studies makes you, or at least familiarizes you with working with paint consistency and being much more conscious of that thickness of paint as you build it up in the palette and as you apply it to the paper. And you start to see the direct result of that as it dries, that the strong, thick paint is absolutely necessary when we're trying to convey strong light. We need that. We need that strong dark against a very pale light to establish a feeling of direct light or blinding light or strong light like we're painting right now. And you can see that it's emerging. The deep sky is important for that. Having the midtone in the tree has been important for that also. And the darks under the rooftops, the moldings, the darkness on the moldings, certainly that deep tone in the shadow that's in the foreground. All of these combine to make that initial wash, that very pale wash, glow. And in this case, I feel like it's coming together now in this small study, and I'm pleased with the feeling of light, and I can see that a few highlights here and there, another strong accent here and there will give me the sort of result that I want. Later on, you'll see I transformed these paintings into color versions, but the beginning of the idea and the beginning of those color paintings is actually in this tonal study. All the lights and darks are accounted for. The mood of the scene is captured, and I credit these tonal studies with the success, or sometimes with the failure of any one piece if I'm negligent and my tonal work is out of sync, then the whole painting's out of sync. So it's an important part of the painting process for me. And well, here it is. This is the coming up on the conclusion of this little study of Trinity Church in a bright light in the golden hour. And if you remember the other two studies we did, you can tell how the tonal range is much higher in this last painting than it was in the previous two. So this is a little indicator, a little thing to think about as you move forward with your painting and developing a motif, how you can do that through an awareness of tonal values, through an awareness of lights and darks. Here you can see a color version representative. It's derived from that snow scene. I won't say it's exactly, it's not the snow scene, but it is a quiet time of day and a very subtle expression using dark midtone, and the range between the lights and the darks is rather close. So I'm trying to paint a soft light in this variation. Very moody piece. And from here I move to the variation of a lighter midtone with some lights and darks, trying to evoke a transitory mood where light is kind of bouncing off of the ground up into the building, giving us a nice draw to that entrance to the church. It's low light, 3/4. The midtone is pretty much right in the middle, and lights and darks are added, but the midtone is what I feel is controlling the mood. Here's a rendition of our golden hour, where I'm using a very bright tone and strong dark tones, dark accents right next to each other to evoke that bright, luminous feeling that you might see if the light is coming right over your shoulder. And look how soft those shadows are below. Bright sunlight. The midtone is very bright, and the darks and the lights are complementing that. Well, let's look to one of the masters of mood and the masters of developing a motif. Claude Monet painted haystacks numerous times, and through this series you'll see how he is so respectful of the light and how his respect of the light is translated into lights and darks. Look how close the values are related here. The color accents are really carrying this painting. A completely different mood from the one that we saw before. Much more subtle, I feel. The haystacks were a motif that Monet returned to many times, and in fact his career is full of examples of him developing a single motif and really developing changes in the light, and thus changes in the mood. And if you study them from a point of view of tonal values, you'll see how he is conscious of that and manipulating tonal values to create and strengthen a mood. So I hope this long video, I'm sorry it's so long, has given you food for thought and given you things that you can use in your own watercolors to develop your memory, develop your imagination, and develop a sense of mood in your paintings.